So Paul sent this story to us. John Wilner in the San Jose Mercury News and also the Wilner Hotline. Pac-12 collapse. Washington State's Kirk Schultz suggests that Fox's strategy. I told you guys I didn't feel great. Fox's strategy to block Apple fueled the Big Ten's raid on Washington and Oregon.
Yeah, so
and there's also a nugget about Arizona when they had their foot in the door at the Big 12, too.
So Kirk Schultz's conspiracy theory, and he even acknowledges in there, he said, I know people are going to say, Kirk, put on your tinfoil hat, is that Fox, knowing that Apple was putting their foot in the door in college football, decided to get involved and get Oregon and Washington out to the Big Ten so that they could keep Apple out of college football for 5 or 6 more years, which, you know, as conspiracy theories go, actually isn't that far-fetched. It's a pretty good strategic business decision by Fox to try to keep, you know, the largest company in the world out of your business if you can for as long as you can before they make a bigger move, and maybe you have more time to plan and you know, build a counter to it, because Apple is just a behemoth and they could buy everything and everybody right now. And that's, I'm sure, what a lot of people are worried about is how do you compete with it if they just have unlimited money to go at, much like kind of like the Saudis. Like, how do you stop it from happening once it happens? And the other contention in this article is that Arizona had already applied to the Big 12 on Wednesday before the Friday meeting. And when the Big 10 heard about this, they had no more qualms about being the
conference killer.
The conference killer, which is just such a weird way to split hairs, considering that when it comes specifically to the Pac-12, they're the ones that started it.
But here's the key, Craig and Paul. When did they find that out? If they entered basically agreed basically on Wednesday, it didn't come down official until Friday night, although we know a lot of work was done overnight on Thursday. So what if they wouldn't have found out? Could that have saved the Pac-12? What if they wouldn't have found out? Would they have jumped in on Friday morning with Oregon and Washington?
I don't know. I feel like, it's been interesting to get some of the details after the fact of just sort of the unpacking and, the autopsy being done, although that's not fair because the Pac-12 is still technically alive. But, yeah, I don't really buy into they were going to sign on Friday and then all of a sudden they got a call. I just don't believe that. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. I don't believe that you make just such a flippant decision all of a sudden in seconds of time or minutes of time when you were intent on doing the other thing right before you got said phone call or you made said phone call. I call BS on that. I know that people have their sources and everything, but I feel like, you might have been waiting for the final sign-off from the Big Ten maybe, but I don't think that anything was getting done without that final sign-off from the Big Ten. So if the Big Ten said, we're open arms and we're good to go, green light, then they're like, boom, good, green light, let's go. I don't know. I don't feel like, it was some, everything was great and it was all going to be settled and this just one thing happened and it all came crumbling down. I just think way too many things happened in the build-up, way too many uncertainties for what would happen after the fact. That deal looked good that they were presented and everything like that, but I just don't buy into they were all going to sign that Friday morning and everything was going to move on, and just all of a sudden this call came in that ruined everything, or this call went out that ruined everything. I don't believe that.
And I think you're probably right. What I get, and from talking to people that were always, it seemed like, right there in the middle of all this, I'm not saying anybody from the Pac-12, but those who had contacts, is that Friday morning was more of a maybe send a message out through the public, through social media or whatever, to possibly delay things, which is what the Pac-12 went through for 13 months. And so, do they have a deal? No, because they only have 4 teams. And so they're delayed again because who's going to be in the Pac-12? Who's going to be added to the Pac-12? It's just, but I believe Friday was a Hail Mary, a PR type stunt, and a stunt's maybe not the right word, to maybe cool the jets because they knew that Arizona was gone and that they knew it was just a matter of time that Washington and Oregon were leaving that day.
I don't know that I agree with that, because if you found out, I think it's interesting, where we're trying to point the fingers on how this all actually unfolded. I mean, learning about how it all kind of occurred is cool to hear after the fact. But, I mean, if you had an idea that Arizona was leaving on Thursday night, then Oregon and Washington were still showing up Friday morning and just ready to sign off. But then, oh, my God, that phone call happened right before, and then they suddenly – so they were cool, like no Arizona, just moving on along. And I'm sure somebody would be like, yeah, they were going to add SMU and San Diego. I just don't believe that. I don't believe Oregon and Washington were cool with losing Colorado and Arizona and then just, let's sign a grant of rights and sign this Apple deal. And, the Big Ten might be interested, but we'll just leave that on the table for a few. No, I think that everybody did what was best for them to the very last moment. And it just so happened that it went long enough to where the Pac-12 thought that maybe they'd found the solution and everybody got on board. But there were just way too many uncertainties. And ultimately, everybody knew, like, hey, it's time to get off the pot, make those final phone calls and throw your final lifelines out. And everybody did. And what they got in return was a ship off the island. And that all led to whatever they thought was going to happen on Friday being completely dissolved by the time it actually got around to it. So, I mean, I believe just about anything as far as the sequencing of events go is pretty clear. I mean, Arizona, clearly by that, was gone anyways prior to Oregon and Washington. So for the debate on, they only left because not according to that story. So, I find it all kind of a mess to roll through. But the biggest mess was just that they got to that point anyways.
Wouldn't you love to have seen the Pac-12 presidents, with all due respect to all of them, have been as aggressive in trying to figure out what they were going to be as a conference before all of them leave. Not USC and UCLA, they've been gone for a year. If they would have been as aggressive with that and getting knowledge of their television deal and really what it was, as they were, it appeared, with a PR campaign every other 3 weeks or every 3 weeks. And even now, they're still trying to, this is why it fell apart. And I'm intrigued by this.
Well, I think you also have to tell your story. I mean, you don't just hey, the conference loses members and you just don't talk about it. I mean, they're trying to talk through it, I think, and they're also trying to just tell the story of what actually happened. And for some reason, there's a lot of people like, oh, one me, look over there, me. And it's like, who cares at this point?
That's one of the quotes. Tony Petitti, Big Ten commissioner, when he heard about the Arizona news, tells his presidents, we aren't the ones. They felt like they weren't the ones to fire the kill shot. And so that's how they got involved as quickly as they did.
Then based on him, that it doesn't even matter what Oregon and Washington were doing because the kill shot was Arizona leaving. So again, we can just go in circles on who's to blame for what. The Big Ten absolutely deserves some of the blame. Absolutely they do. I don't know why there's this attempt by, I don't know if it's a fan or if it's even the conference itself to try and pretend like their hands are clean for some PR reason. I don't know what point there is in that.
You got 4, the Big 12 got
who cares?
4. again, there's
they got the first 2 that started the other 6. Yeah.
They opened up, they pulled the plug and it leaked, but and it leaked badly. The Pac-12 is to blame for its own demise because they weren't in it as much as, and maybe because they had so many precedents that were on the outside of looking into the college football world, as where the Big 12 had their crisis in 2010, 11, whatever that was, and were then constantly, it's like when your town gets wiped out by a hurricane, and the next time a hurricane comes, you're more ready for it because you realize what you did wrong, right? Well, I think the Big 12 learned from the first hurricane and approached the next one with preparedness, as where the Pac-12 never experienced a hurricane and then thought oh, well, they'll never hit here. And then found out that no, they're indiscriminate and they come for whoever they want to, and just waited. And your PR campaign wasn't them working hard at it. That was them barely working at it because they would get to the point where people are like, hey, we've been asked a lot of questions about this and it's kind of dragging on. Well, all right, well, send out a statement and that should shut the plebes up a little bit.
Give a quote.
I just think it's silly that the Big Ten, based on this article, is acting like nothing would have happened until Arizona decided on Thursday night they were leaving as a precautionary. So if it was precautionary and they weren't officially leaving, they were just looking for the lifeboat, as this article states, then just looking into things was enough to get Oregon and Washington to call up the Big Ten, was enough to get the Big Ten to go, well, they're not official. So based on this, Arizona was just looking into the idea of, just in case by the next morning everything had fallen apart. But based on this, the Big Ten took them just looking into it as, oh, they're out.
That's a
now we
green
can
light.
add Oregon and Washington. That doesn't add up to me.
That
Come
is
on now.
interesting that if Arizona, in fact, on Wednesday knew, they were approved by the Big 12 on Thursday night.
Right.
That board meeting when they had the University or the Arizona Board of Regents with Crow and Robbins, you just wonder what Robbins was thinking during that entire meeting when Crow was trying to keep everything together. All right, when we come back, Paul